Push your button on. Good evening and welcome to the September 4th Master Plan Subcommittee meeting. I begin by apologizing not getting to the group the last updates that we talked about, but I've given you a hard copy of that to work from.
Thank you.
So we're continuing from our last meeting. The biggest thing that changed is it was kind of a general consensus to move general issues from page 3 to page 2 and to expand that. Question is in two parts. First, rank the top 5 general issues where is doing well. Second, please rank the top 5 general issues that must be addressed. And so I've identified that. And then the development of trails, walking, hiking, biking, to be more specific. And then the issue of transportation was discussed that we felt it wasn't necessary to delete it completely, but to change the questions. And so the questions that, the two questions that were presented, and I kept the third that was part of the previous document. Are you able to commute as your life demands? If no, what is needed to make your commute functional? What means of transportation provided by other towns should where considered to be helpful to your commuting abilities? What, in your opinion, is the most pressing transportation problem facing where? Is kept from the previous document. So that's where we left off, and we tabled general issues to either recreate or to address, good evening, the issues of concern. We've begun, so just so you know.
Okay.
Let me move down. So you have a microphone.
Thank you. I know we don't want to get bogged down on pages we've already talked about, so just as a small, I guess very small critique on the general issues.
Yep.
My eye was drawn to the chart immediately,
Yep.
and when I saw the headers well, address and concern,
Yep. Well, I didn't know
I-
how.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I read that as address and was thinking
Yep.
like, what do we look, so maybe well and poorly, or just something that are more,
Poorly or
just, yeah.
concern?
That's the only thing that
Okay.
comes to mind.
And should it be concern?
Could be priorities, taking a page out of one of the other surveys, issue, potentially.
Or, well, you could do a, make each of these two existing ones subheaders, so concern is already the third column, but if you put a header over top of the first two columns and said priority,
Oh, sorry, I just meant like instead of general issues, just top 5 priorities for where.
well, it's the top and the bottom, right?
Right.
Or, well, I guess that's not entirely accurate either. It's the top 5 that are the town is doing well, and the top 5 that the town is not doing well.
Right.
So is it,
Must be addressed. I mean, that's how the previous document said, must be addressed.
Yeah.
That's a major concern. So it's, even that when we look at concern, maybe that's not a good word to describe those issues. Maybe it should be issues or.
But regardless of the word we pick, I was kind of thinking perhaps we come up with some fresh concerns, priorities, issues, as a group, as some of these could be outdated or just no longer relevant. Like a launching point could be just to look at some of our neighbors' surveys and, I don't know, just to see what kind of pops out to us potentially. The other guys each have like 20, 30 just issues like all over the place, and kind of gives the survey respondent the ability to sort of get inspired, pick and choose, like, oh yeah, that resonates with me, that doesn't, and then we sort of get a big picture of what are the priorities or values.
Right. So why don't we start with, what are the things on the list that can be eliminated?
Town planner jumps out at me.
Great. Okay, and improvements to 114,
Yeah.
Great.
because that's already addressed in traffic control and improvements. Right?
And it's a state road.
Correct.
Drainage, what is drainage?
At least the planning board's perspective, that sometimes when a new development or several houses go in, I'll give you an example on Mountain Road, that whole corner development of Perkins Pond and Mountain Road. The abutters to all the properties were concerned about water coming off someone else's driveway into their property. And how do you handle that, and what's going on, and where's this water coming from
Okay.
as it is? So that's probably what I would think in
Is
that
that a-
perspective.
Is that too acute of an issue to be relevant for a
I-
public survey?
I think, just to bolster what you're saying a little bit, in the year and a half I've been on the Board of Selectmen, we've had somebody come to us asking us to address drainage in a particular spot, whether it's, oh, the road was graded, or the plowing changed, whatever. I'd say
So maybe,
five times in a year
maybe,
and a half.
maybe to broaden
Well-
that, to say drainage of roadway property drainage, or,
For new construction or just for existing construction?
well, so, another example, there was this, dividing up a farm on South Sugar Hill Road, and the way the property is above these other four houses. And carving in driveways into that property, and there was wetlands behind. Is the wetlands behind gonna be affected so that it flooded these other two houses down below? And where's the water coming off those other driveways into an existing culvert that's blocked? How does that work when it's gonna come and infiltrate my property now? So I think it's an important concept when people are thinking about, where's all this water going?
Definitely, so I'm just
You
thinking.
know,
like,
but I think it could be clarified. Yeah, it's
Draining in-
acute as in, well, it's a very narrow thought, but it's also a thought that has no substance to it. What do you mean drainage? You know, because that's,
Well, and I think in the context, it's, everyone is concerned about, again, acute or specific drainage in acute or specific areas. And from a survey general perspective, and I know that there's a rank order to this, but, you're gonna say, yes, so I care about that. But what does that mean? And what would that being a high priority mean?
Well, so we don't necessarily have to restrict ourselves to like 5 issues and ranked choice. It could be like high priority, medium priority, not a priority. And you could have plenty of high priorities.
Well, yeah, I guess that's kind of what it, that's sort of what I mean. It's like unless you rank order it properly, you're always gonna say, well, yes, I want, drainage is like a fundamental. You can't have your house be flooded. You can't have your land be flooded. It's sort of like a table stakes type of question, whereas you can conceivably, whatever, prioritize or differ on like affordable housing or on newer upgraded facilities. Drainage, it's like, well, if my house is underwater, then,
So would it be, would it be reasonable to combine protecting drinking water quality and supply with protection of the Piscataquag River and other streams and lakes, and drainage, and into something
Sure, yeah.
about water, such as protecting water quality, supply, and control?
Something to that
Or
effect.
maybe water because you, water control, quality and supply. And
Yeah, because I
quality
know,
and
I know when we,
Something
and this
to
was
that
before I was on the board, but when Duck Pond Estates was being considered, the biggest concern was the aquifer that affects your hill and everybody at the basin of that, and how to protect that without over-regulating what they can or can't do, because by zoning, they could go in there and build, because they could meet all the qualifications for that. But it was a concern of the general populace from the
Sure.
word go, before anything happened.
Okay.
And then there was a stall because no one was wanting to pay for the power to go across 114. They're trying to put it under the highway. We first talked about it, and then they put it over the highway down the road a bit, and not right across from where it is. So those types of things are always going to be addressed eventually by the planning process. The planning board is going to say, how are you going to do this? How, are you going to, you know, like you're putting in a driveway, if it's above a certain grade, you got to bring it down to meet the grade for a fire truck to make it up there, and is it going to be able to turn around at the top? Or where are you going to put the snow? All those types of things come to play. So maybe, like we've already noted, instead of saying protecting drinking water quality supply, proper supervision or proper,
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like
and make that part of that
ensure
understanding.
appropriate building standards are met. You know, again, that seems like a table stakes type of scenario, rather than a specific, you know, interchangeable type of question in this context. I could be, you don't have to
Yeah,
agree with
yeah,
that,
no,
but,
okay.
but that's how I
If I
understand
can,
it.
if I can build on that, Dan. 2 parts. The first is, does the planning board need, what does the planning board learn from residents on these particular topics? Is feedback from residents critical to those types of criteria being upheld, whether it's, you know, the elevation of a property versus another one for drainage and things of this sort? That sounds very within the realm of technical, the technical realm of planning as it is. And, and I think that to the second point that I like to make, that there's several of these in here where I'm wondering if there is a broad enough understanding of the item for it to be meaningful, right? For example, we just talked about drainage. I would say that's sort of case in point. If we talk about it that long right now, that it starts to, and we could apply that logic against 8 probably of these. And I'm not trying to come in with a heavy swing here, but I would say that in similar fashion, you know, protecting open spaces, protecting drinking water quality and supply. To Dan's point, I think it's, some items have, you know, the option to say no has to be there as well, plus it's covered in detail in question 17. The amount and location of new development, right? So, like, does the average, and I would even say just for myself, like, do I have a fundamental knowledge of the overall distribution of land within where to make a reasonable comment as to the priority of how that's allocated? I don't, right? And so, when I use that lens across, there's several of these that I think fit into that, where I'm not sure, A, if we're gonna gain much insight. In looking at the prior results, I'm not sure if there was anything conclusive there. The second part is, I think especially is when so I'm gonna pause there, because there's one more point, but I don't bring 3 points into it. But that's, I lean towards, I have
Right.
NA next to several of
So,
these.
so just so we know from the last report, the last survey, number 1 was tax burden, number 2 was location and new development, number 3 is attracting new business, number 4 is protecting open space, and number 5 was protecting drinking water.
Right.
So,
And I think we're just, sorry, if I can interject.
yep,
What I take into account is we have a response rate in 2005 of just shy of 10%, right? So on any question, it lends itself to saying, this is a priority. So if 15% of a 9% of 350 people says 10, 20%, it just, I think that it becomes worth
So-
more analysis.
And
Right.
it's interesting what you were saying before about, because 2005, that's, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of in the heart of the Duck Pond Estates discussion as a town. And so the things that you've listed, I think, would have been very top of mind for people who
Right.
were interested in responding to this. And so I'm kind of, I think
Well-
what you're saying is interesting about that lens of like, we trust the planning board to be experts in minutia. So don't ask about minutia, ask
Right.
about what is the
Yes.
strategy that the
Correct.
town is interested in, and allow the planning board to,
So the
Execute.
question,
Yeah.
follow up on that, to say amount and location in new development. In my work with the planning board, we don't, that's not in our field of purview, because we're not building. We're interpreting, or not interpreting, we're applying the principles of our zoning to whoever comes to us. So in the time I've been on that board, there's been one big tract in South Ware, off of Dustin, in the Dustin Tavern area, that was supposed to have a 5-6 house development put in, and it never happened because of cost. So even though someone might come with a conceptual to us, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen. It doesn't mean we want it to happen, other than they, as long as they're meeting the qualifications for it to happen. And that's the hard part, is that when someone comes for a building permit, they don't go through the select board.
Right.
They don't, can we get permission to do this at, behind your house? And they don't, because that's not their, when you look at that planning process, even, so if we've taken town planner off, what would be the purpose of a town planner? Town planner would be the one who would be setting the standards, say, here's a good place for development. Well, it might be a good place, but it's owned by, or it's in conservation, or it's in current use, and you're not gonna get it without a tax burden to get it out of that. And so, those types of things aren't happening, because we're not metropolitan, we're not urban in making sure that we're not just putting up all kinds of skyscrapers in downtown Ware. So if we can consolidate the whole idea of the water issue into one clean statement, that would be best. New and upgraded town facilities, what other than the town hall? Which isn't ever really considered, that I know of, in the time I've been here, that we need a new town building to make,
certainly maintenance on the existing one,
Everybody.
but not,
right.
yeah.
So I'm not convinced that town center or creative town square is something that is feasible, but it may be on someone's bullet list to say that that's important to me. So I don't, if I can understand the gist of what we discussed last time, is that this is gonna set the stage for further exploration in following.
Yes.
And we were suggesting that at the close, at one of the questions at the end in the vision, is to ask them to go back and look at your priorities, based upon what now you've further explored in your answers to the questions, are those still the same priorities? And then recast them in the vision part. So now we have a clearer understanding, instead of just ramble, because that, when you look at the report, you find that, there's all kinds of additional under visions and goals, a lot of information that just goes on and on and on and on and on, that should have been answered earlier, or at least explored earlier. And bring it back to a base, a foundation, not to say that and that's the danger here. The danger here is that the more we fine tune this, it's more like here's our priorities, here's our,
That's a good point.
right, because we don't want to manipulate the process. We want to have as broad as information as possible. But just like later on when we have, what's that statement?
Well, that would line, just while you look up, and not to, interject, but that would, I think, line up with, Salem and Sean's point, right? Like, we should take out the minutia of
Right.
the technical pieces, which can live in here.
Right. And that's the other part, is that the educational piece, when, if and when that happens, that the public knows that, listen, this is your opportunity to put your 2 cents in, if you will, to give us insight and understanding what you're thinking. But that doesn't mean that what you're thinking is now going to become absolute zoning, because the zoning's already established. This will give us guidelines to then, to amend or change that zoning, based upon your input and what is being presented to the planning board. And so there's there's always some things that when you go through establishing a statement, in the moment, it sounds right to you. Give it 2 years, it doesn't sound right to you. Because in that moment, because of the information that you're bombarded with, that's the way to say it. But is it going to prove the test of time to know that later on someone comes to, well, I read it this way. And someone else will say, well, I read it this way. So that means it's not clear.
Sure, yes.
So those types of things have to be changed in order to, and that's what the planning board does, is not just receive information at a work session. We're taking the time to say, okay, what do we need to address? What are the, things that we need to bring to the community to vote on and for warrants, articles, et cetera, to bring changes for our current zoning. And that's something that's constantly on our minds, to consider and ponder. One of those things is wetlands, and we've talked about that for at least 5 years, and we came up with a plan, and then that plan went out the window because there was someone else who had a different perspective. We still have yet to hear that perspective, but we tabled that for a time, but now it's back on our, wetland buffers, et cetera. So, again, that comes back to the whole water issue.
So to,
So, yeah,
so to Phil's point, so I think to build off of that, Bill, if I heard you correctly, Phil, you say that, why necessarily constrained to this, some other surveys have broader lists. If I can be on the opposing side of that, just for conversation, is, I think when it comes to, one is, I think when we confuse issues and priorities in the same list. And Bill, you had said, if the more we refine this, the more we run the risk of sort of leading our audience.
Right.
So with those 2 items in mind, could it be simply just asked, what are the top 3 challenges facing where? Having people know what the issues are. I don't know if they need a list, because that can have some negative priming. And if it's not top of mind, is it that much of an issue?
I'm gonna rebut from the other side. I think if you have just a ton of ideas, it's not leading because you have a little bit of everything. So it's like, just here's a bunch of different stuff from this area, from that area. Questions potentially even phrased this way and then the other way. So then you really get the full picture, I think. To allow people to really just get their ideas out there.
Yeah, and that's the line of demarcation that I think is important between an issue and a priority. Like, what am I having, what do I experience as an issue? And here are some areas that I'm interested in, which may be an issue or they may be in addition to, right? It may be just some areas of interest. So for example, I don't think that there's an issue with recreation, but I know another town that has this cool bike path, and I think it'd be great if we added to that, right? So there's,
So thinking along those same terms then, should we get rid of the list completely and give 4, 3 or 5 blanks? What are your top 5 issues that we're doing well? Boom, boom, boom. And then it's their heart as opposed to us trying to figure out their heart.
So-
And then the same thing for the second part. What are the top 5 general issues that must be addressed over the next 5 years?
So and this is a question, so in the spirit of Sean's comment, which is a good one. There is a difference. This right now is sort of loaded with two questions, which is issue and priority, which are not the same thing. So, just to clarify, because it's a good point, and maybe we do a write-in style more than a, checkbox style. But this is, 14 says, issues and priorities, whereas you can list something as an issue, which means that it has to be, sort of addressed, right? Because it's causing some negative, there's some negative that needs to be addressed, right? And the point is, how do we not turn a kind of nice to, you made the perfect example, right? Like, you turned okay, well, I don't really, recreation isn't an issue, but, Goffstown has a cool bike path, and I want one. So now you've made it an issue, right? So we just have to be cognizant of not. And I don't know if maybe just listing that out solves that problem, but I guess I wanted to double down on the comment, because it's a smart one, and that's how I kind of read this too, is, like, hey, listen, how am I gonna go get the thing that isn't an issue and kind of make it work?
The problem I see with eliminating that and kind of what's being discussed is if we left it open, we still have these broad categories of each of these sections, which I think if they weren't, I think they come straight off the RSA, and if they weren't, I think we should use those buckets.
Yeah, they are.
So if we're saying, hey, give us your total open-ended list, but then we are only asking you questions from specific categories, it seems like disingenuous isn't the right word, but it's almost like, I
So
want that
Perhaps it's
data,
unnecessary.
but, so what I was gonna propose was, instead of asking all these individual questions and not eliminating it entirely, if we just said, like, if the list were only the categories, transportation, community facilities and services, and then what we talked about, what you reiterated this time, what we talked about last time, of give them the list, gonna be our job to make sure that again, but yeah, without trying to come up with specific concerns, and then covering some of them in detail and some of them not at all, and some of the things that show up in detail aren't listed here. I would propose just categories in the list, and then rank them.
Gotcha. I understand now.
And given the number of categories, which may or may not expand, again, based on the RSA, it may end up that 5 is the wrong number. It may be that it's the right number, I'm just, maybe it's 3, maybe it's, rank them all.
Yeah, it looks like 5, but yes.
But I don't want to lose that open-ended data, because another thought I was having that I think is not feasible, but as a topic of conversation, if we could have an open-ended, if we could have this first survey that goes out, and we solicit, give us all your off-the-wall ideas, and we talk about this, just like we want people's feedback. It may not be all good feedback, it may not be feasible, but, tell us what you're thinking. And then if we could winnow that down to something that, again, we're trusting the planning board to have expertise here, like winnow it down to a realistic feasible list, could even put out a follow-up survey of, hey, given this list that initially came from town input, we, narrowed it down, or consolidated topics, or what have you, put things in central categories, rank that as a follow-up before doing the final, plan update.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know that that's feasible, because I am concerned about how many people will respond, and then how many people will respond if there are 2, and how do you make sure it's the same people and all that, but
And what's the timeline?
I wanted to talk about it.
So is that closer to what Phil mentioned, which is expanding this list, or is it truly open-ended? I'm just trying to understand the suggestion.
So,
Yeah, two different suggestions, and they
Yeah.
aren't entirely, they don't, somewhat at odds. The first one being the categories as the general issues. Another one being, if it's totally open-ended, take that list and then have a second survey later, and between the two surveys, sit down and either this group or the planning board as a whole, turn that set of open-ended answers into a list that then we ask about, additionally. Now, I'm not saying like put any of this off, but go through all this and then additionally say, hey, we got some really good feedback on the first one, we would like more feedback.
So could we handle that in a non-survey fashion by having a public meeting?
Yeah.
Say, this is what we've discovered. How can we now fine tune this based, because what we discover is gonna be narrower than what the survey is about, right? Is what you're saying. And then you wanna prioritize that narrow focus.
Yeah, yeah, if we, using the bike path, to keep using that
Yeah.
example, if one person says bike path, like, okay, we're not gonna spend an enormous amount of man hours in we're not gonna talk about that. But if 50% of people, again, to use water as the example, if 50% of respondents said they wanna talk about that, we'll make sure that gets a good amount of time. I think that's,
What's the, just from it's September 4th, right? And this has to, what are our obligations to meeting survey release deadlines? We mentioned, October.
Well,
So does that
that's
mean- what does that mean?
self-imposed.
That
That's
is self-imposed.
self-imposed. That's not mandated by the state or anybody. We're 10 years behind.
Right.
So
Well,
it's
just
not-
saying,
Yeah,
just
so we're not-
to that point.
Yeah. So what if we, as Salem said, what if we just use the 7 categories for the general issues? Transportation, community facilities and services, land use, growth and management, natural resources, open space, cultural resources, economic development, housing and zoning, and visions, goals, and not objections. Objectives.
I was gonna say.
So, and then maybe, okay,
Does it
transportation
have to-
could,
Can that be, sorry, Bill, I just wonder if it can be extrapolated,
yes,
right? So do you have to have it, because each category is answered in more detail,
correct.
if it can be extrapolated thematically, what are the, what are the categories that are surfacing as because really the question is, what's the biggest issues?
Right.
Right, and so I think it can be pulled, so it's almost a duplicative effort. It can be pulled out of those, because that's something that's being experienced. Phil brings up a good point around the broader list, I think, when it comes to expansion, because, when it comes to an issue, that's what's experienced, that's what somebody knows, right? When it comes to expansion and possibilities, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's where a more expansive list can be helpful to, garner participation in that way.
If-
So not to deviate from what you're saying, I just don't want to lose.
if each category, at the end of every category, end of transportation, it says, what did we not cover? And so if it's something that that's the one thing they cared about, they could write a 10-paragraph essay to us. And then we would have that for, the next round of feedback to say, wow, we actually missed the boat on, we should have had these other questions that we'd like to ask in a different format. I think that would address that concern. We can't come up with every possible answer, but if we allow people to, and I think give good questions what we think are good questions. And another thing I was thinking, if we do ask the same, if we say, prioritize your concerns and at the beginning, and then again at the end, that's almost a control on, did we do a good job of not being leading? Because if we did, their list should probably be the same. If they went through everything we talked about, and they said, nope, I came in hopefully well-informed, and these questions, were detailed enough that I learned equally about all things, and I have the same concerns. I guess that's not, talking through, that's not entirely true, because if you were not
Yeah, I was gonna
well-informed
say,
coming
I think
in,
right.
then you may say, oh, wow, I had never thought about the water problem, but these questions make me realize, and even though we're not trying to lead, it is informing.
Well, and is it our expectation that like this will be done in ink rather than pencil? And, you're gonna have a rank order at the front end that says like 1 through 5.
Yeah,
You
that's-
get to the end and you say, oh, wait a second,
Yeah.
they can look, they can erase, you know what I mean? Or, are they only gonna get one survey? I'm just saying,
So we've already made it plain that this section, the general issues, can't be focused on the minutia.
And I think
I-
we're all
yes.
getting to the same place, because if we skip to the end, there is a visions, goals, and objectives section, which can be more open and
Yeah,
more of a
right.
wish list.
So if we take, vision, goals, and objectives off, oh, no, I'll leave that on. We could break out housing to be separate from zoning. So we have eight categories then. We could break out natural resources, which is different than open space, which is different than cultural resources. So there's 3 more categories.
To consolidate, you're saying?
Or to break them out
break
for
them.
this section.
Yeah, and then that would allow us better depth in
So
those
then,
three.
so then if we then go and say, okay, now these are, maybe there's other questions we want to add, but at the end of each section, they say, okay, what did we miss? What are your concerns specifically? And that will be then within the context of that topic.
Yep.
Whereas the end becomes, yes, there's some things that can be addressed here in visions, goals, and objectives, but that becomes just a flood of information that's kind of disconnected. So if we offer that at the end of each section, an opportunity to expound,
Yeah.
that would be more helpful than leaving it to the end and making us now reconnect it to their thought,
Yep.
to the category.
Just to confirm understanding, Bill, this is a reference to question 13. Basically, this is the removal of question 13 as it is and putting under each section an option to expand.
Both and. So we will use the category titles for each section as this format, right here. So we would use transportation, community services, facilities, break out, and then third with community services, land use, growth and management, natural resources, open space, cultural resources, economic development, housing, zoning, and then visions, goals, and objectives.
Yeah.
And
we're
then
not,
rank,
how would we
then,
manage-
and we're
then
not
those,
setting
rank
that
those.
in stone right this second, because over the next, however long it takes for us to get through this, we may realize, another category, combine these back.
Correct. Yeah.
we're-
It's all fluid. It's
Yeah.
not, even though we're up to question 13, it's still fluid.
If I'm
So-
understanding it correctly, what you just said, Bill, so the categories would be ranked.
Right.
Each of the categories becomes expanded where they're entered. So how would it be handled if there's a conflict between what the ranking is on the categories versus when you take the average of how the answers are
Well, that's
Or
where we go back to, at the end, as part of that question concerning visions, goals, and objectives, that they now need to go back and say, has anything changed in your perspective based upon what you've now gone through back on question 13? Because we talked about
Are
that
we
last
gonna
time.
say that specifically?
Yes.
Okay, I'm
It
asking.
will be a question that we
Yeah.
will ask, based upon what you've already discovered. Has your opinion or perspective changed because of this further information or expansion? Because each category got expanded.
okay.
So they may have, and that's the hard part, is that how do all these things fit into
Do we,
the rest of the document?
it's a question, I'm not, hopefully not leading. Do we expect that people's opinions will change, having read through a survey and answered it?
Yeah.
I think so.
You do?
Yeah, if we were asking questions like, hey, if it were 2005, and we were like, hey, what do you think about the possibility of running power under 114?
Okay,
And somebody's like, I didn't even know you could do that. They've now learned something, and they may say like, I wish I could have underground power everywhere.
okay. But we're talking about like two very acute, specific points in time.
Right, it's an
right?
example.
Right,
But,
well, no, I hear you, and that's okay. I'm just saying
So
like,
here's a scenario that could happen. So we're encouraging every adult, any person over 18 to fill out the survey. whether you're a resident as owning the property or residing in the property that you're renting, right? So you wouldn't expect you to sit down and you do it with your wife, and that would be the final. Each of you would have an opportunity to share.
Right.
But as you're going through it, I don't know what the time limit is on a Survey Monkey.
Yeah, right.
You know, if there's a survey limit, it's to, well, you need to get it done within an hour, or else you're gonna lose all your information. Or is it like when you start filling out something for your taxes on TurboTax, and you can click it and save it and come back to it, and it brings you back where you've left off?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it works that way, but if it did, there'd be opportunity for you to go have a conversation with your wife or your, whoever else in town to say, hey, I've been taking this survey, what do you think of this? And, you know, and then all of a sudden your perspective changed because you had a different conversation with someone else who had a different perspective on what was going on.
Sure, totally get, and I'm not making a value, it's just, like, are we gonna be cognizant of, like, the social engineering that's happening during our survey? You know, like, that seems.
I think that's one of those trade-offs that is gonna be really.
I'm not trying to, impose an opinion, that's just, I'm commenting, basically,
Yeah.
One of our goals is to not be leading, and if I think it can help inform, did we achieve that goal at the end?
And I hear you, I think that's right. It's, what is the ability, and this is a technical question, not a survey question. What's the ability for, and maybe I'm just hung up on this and I'll let it rest after this. I have my priorities on, whatever, page, whatever it's gonna end up being, 6 on the Survey Monkey. I get through it and I'm on page 12, right? And I realize that, my answers have changed, let's just say that. Do I go back to page 6 and change them?
No. You're recording it live at the last.
But do you know what I'm saying? Like if I'm in the middle of a test and I know this isn't a test, but just follow the analogy.
Good point. If it's
Follow
not,
the
if it's not
analogy.
a test, then yeah, do we allow people to?
Right,
Do we
like-
encourage people to?
Right, and I'm saying, again, it's not a perfect analogy, but whatever. If I'm taking a test and I give answers, and then I go through and I realize that the answers that I gave are not true because it's my opinion. I'm supposed to be reflecting my opinion at a certain statement of time. I should then go back and change them, right? So if we are seeking we should be getting consistency, actually not change from, the rank order to the end. Because you should say, if you are, again, taking it, I should say, oh, and going back. Again, I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know that it matters, but
And maybe what we're looking.
but that is a thing.
If
and
we could show, they've answered all the questions and they not submit yet, but like a preview, say, okay, this is what you are about to submit. You see it all on
that's
one
what I would
page.
do.
You
I mean,
see
I would say,
all
oh,
that.
look, actually that wasn't right. I answered question
Yeah.
5 incorrectly
We were talking about only
for
showing the
me.
beginning, but if we could show
You know?
all of it, and then they could start doing what you're saying of like, well, you
Right.
know what, I guess I did start skewing this way, and maybe
Yes.
that's not true, and then allow.
All right, so,
Again, I don't like have a, like,
Yeah.
I guess an opinion on that, but that is how I would do it. I'm just, I'm gonna look at it and say my priorities are 1 through 5, but I ended up at 5 through 1. Well, wait a second, that makes no sense. I need to make sure that they're consistent across both.
We're advocating for the ability to go back and amend a survey.
I actually don't have an.
I like that.
I don't know, yeah, I mean,
Now that you've brought
Because it's
that
not
up.
You know what I
a-
mean?
It's
Like-
not a test.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
We're looking for correct information.
right, and it just seems strange to
So-
have counterintuitive answers in the same survey experience. Like, that's just a strange, again, I'm not trying to make, like, I don't exactly know what to do about that, but that's like a very strange outcome to have 2 sets of priorities in the same survey results for the same person is bizarre,
well,
right? Like,
I'll leave that.
Well, we're not like.
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah. And like I said, I'll
So,
leave
a
it,
way,
but-
a way to,
But that's a good,
a way to address it is to say, please review your answers.
Sure.
And make it easy for them to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all.
Don't click 30 times back, 30 times forward. Like,
Right.
Here's a,
Again, technical.
yeah, Like, can we give them a final preview? This is what you're about to submit. Are you good with it?
Right.
So ability to review and edit, all survey results before submission.
Correct.
Yeah, because we're, okay.
So that's gonna be on page 9 at the last question.
Yeah, right, review, yeah.
Please review your answers, and what did you say?
Review and edit all survey results before submission.
Because we would technically,
We're gonna be
I said
brushing
it.
up close to the SAT here.
I said
Survey
leave it.
responses.
well,
So, so to Dan's point,
Yeah.
as an alternative, so we explore, you know, if the mechanism, if it can allow to see all the answers. You know, my lean is to first reactions, on some items. However, as an alternative, to say, if we don't want necessarily going back and changing answers, at the end, be just confirming. Now that you've taken the survey, you've answered the questions, you know, now that you've taken the survey, has anything changed?
That puts a big burden on us, though.
Well,
Because
I
if they
was
say yes, well, now what do we do
Well,
with
that's
their
not yes or
data?
no,
Well, and
not
this
yes
is
or
the-
no, meaning like,
this is
No,
my
but
whole,
if they fill in like,
this is my whole point.
yes, now I care about the underground power and I want you to throw away all my answers for question 3.
This is
Like,
what I'm
no,
saying.
just let them edit it.
We're supposed to decipher which ones or set weight on like a
Yeah.
latter answered question rather than a former answered question. That's insane. You know, like, okay, like I said, if we have 1 through 5 and then I go through my learning journey and now it's 5 through 1, and then now it's on us to determine that 5 through 1 is the way that they actually wanted to answer and that they've arrived at that through the course of the survey that they've taken, that seems,
Yeah,
that seems,
it's on-
that seems crazy.
We want good data.
That,
It's
you
on
know.
us to make sure we are not leading, but we know that we will be informing. And at the end of that, we have to trust that the data that we're getting in.
Informing in a broad
Yeah.
perspective,
Like
not
you-
informing that this is what we want done.
Exactly.
So we're gonna sprinkle everything in
Yeah.
just a little bit to convince you that this is what you
But
need.
if you just, again, if you had never even known it was possible to run power underground, now you're like, this is my new favorite topic.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay,
think we're-
we didn't lead that, that was just,
Yeah.
I don't think we've come anywhere close to leading topics such as, what do you feel about ADUs? Like, should we encourage ADUs and where, or like, should we encourage this? And I still think we actually should ask questions like that, as long as we ask a diversity of questions like that. But at the moment, I don't think we've come anywhere near leading or, this danger we're discussing.
No, that's fine. I raised it because the thought came up that people will change during the survey experience. And again, if that's true, we have to, again, and it's probably not gonna be perfect and maybe we can't. That's, to your point, if someone does know something about something and they get struck by lightning and say, okay, now this is my new thing, well, fine. But we have to
we
be
can't
aware.
have something, we can't ask a question about an issue and have it be an unknown thing, right? That doesn't make any sense. For anybody to
Yeah,
answer,
that's
like, this
true.
is an issue.
Fair enough. That's
It's
a better
unknown to
word.
me, but it's an issue,
Yeah, that's a,
right? It's skew the data.
so
In my
you're
simplified-
suggesting that we should have the option like NA or I don't know or whatever.
Which is on most of the questions.
You should have
per
that anyway,
category
actually.
is an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to the issues, I'm gonna personally, I'd stand by, I don't think that 13 needs to exist to rank categories that are broad, to then give more specific information by category, which we
Yeah.
can extract.
I think if we're going to
Thematically,
do a
what are
good
the-
review at the end, that allows them to see it, because we had talked about it last week as a kind of prime the pump of like, hey, these are the things you're gonna see. But really, we could just show them that list, like, this is what the survey's going to be. Be prepared to
Yeah.
answer questions on these topics, and then they go through all the topics, and then we could ask them, and I know we talked last week about should it be at the front or the back, and now I think I'm back, and now I'm in the back camp.
To the front.
I was in the front camp. Now it's, before the visions, goals, and objectives, have the general issues like, okay, you have done a deep dive. You made the point
Yeah.
earlier, we should be able to infer the rank, the priority, based on their answers. So if we wanted it all,
Yeah.
now I'm thinking, okay, put it at the end, like, now that they are as informed as they will ever be,
yeah.
give us your rank and then visions, goals, objectives for,
I'm beating up on this. Why do we, just
He
go
wants
through
to
with it.
take it
Why
out
do we?
completely.
Yeah.
What's that?
You want to take it out completely.
No, 13, yes.
Yeah.
Because
But this was your idea.
What's that, taking it out?
No, expanding the two parts.
Probably.
You learn.
Right, because I think that we're going back and forth because it doesn't really have, like, we're kind of revealing that it's an awkward situation, right? We're kind of asking the same thing in two different ways, and I know in survey sort of technique that there's ways to do that to validate information, but I don't think we're not in that realm, because we're not asking a large data set.
Right.
I think it's simplify, my advocation is to simplify, that to ask somebody to rank categories, then to give more specific answers by category. Thematically, the prioritization, sort of the ranking of those themes will naturally surface. I find myself leaning towards, and I don't know that there's a necessity to have a participant then revalidate their priority to do what, so we can cross-reference those, right? I don't think there's a value add. So if I can just finish
Yeah,
the
go
point
ahead.
real quick. I come back to, at least the structure, of a question that Phil was mentioning before. I'm just wondering if there's opportunity here. There's a lot of focus on issues. We have 6 categories or 7 categories. It goes into depth on each. We haven't gotten to them yet, but they do go into depth. The issues will surface. It's an opportunity to give feedback. And I wonder if there's a chance, but the only chance to the, if I'm correct, to the affirmative, like what are opportunities? What would people like to see, et cetera, is kind of captured in a vision statement, if I'm correct. And I'm wondering, not to start to delve into just in the spirit of removing this, I don't think this is value add. And that more emphasis, when we get to it, is on incorporating some of those possible suggestions by category, or ideas for people to then select from, as I think Phil was mentioning before.
So what's the decision we have to make?
13 stays or goes.
So,
Stays, goes, or goes at the end, or expands?
how could you, and I'm gonna pick questions that we haven't really edited yet, but how could you compare, are you able to commute as your life demands against, please rank the following town facilities?
Well, where's transportation in this one
so
as a category?
traffic control and improvements.
Well, we were talking about using each
First one.
category though.
Frankly, I don't think that if we had 20 people in here, that they would get the same definition of those, of most of these items.
Right, well, we talked about scratching all these individual items and replacing them with a
Yeah,
category.
the headings,
So there would
basically.
be
Okay?
I got
Go ahead.
12.
row one, okay, row one would be transportation, and again, it may grow or shrink as we go through this, but row one, transportation, row two, community facility services, row three, and I won't go through them all, Bill already did, and say, so what I was proposing a minute ago was, don't have general issues at the front and the back. At the front, say, this is what we were about to ask you about. These 12 categories, you said 12 categories. Ask them all these detailed questions that I think we would have difficulty making equally weighted. I think some of them will just naturally have more questions, some of them will have fewer questions, some of them will be able to, we'll have to ask free-form questions that where I'm going with that is then I don't think we will be able to judge one category against another as well as just get to the end and ask them, hey, now that you've filled this out, these are the categories again, not these random
Yeah,
topic, but like,
okay,
these are the
understood.
categories, rank the categories. So, and again,
Yeah,
and
'cause
to,
I agree and disagree with you on the thought of when they finish answering, it's gonna come to the cream of it's gonna come to the top to say, this is a priority for everybody. Well, it may not be in that particular category, in transportation as an example, or community services may be their focus, and everything peters off, but that's an individual, right? So it would be helpful to know at the end, to use these, whether we use the 7 things or expand it to 12, to give a summary that would be our summary focus as to what the priorities
I
are.
think additionally, we will be writing questions that say, for community facilities and services, it's compare all these things against other community facilities and services. It's not, when you're on this page, it's not comparing it against transportation. So I don't know that we,
What's, no, so the comparison is not topic to topic, it's strictly frequency, right? So if 80% of respondents are saying that transportation is of very high importance, based off of the sub-questions, right? If you take the average of these, it would surface a ranking as to which categories have more attention.
well, and my point is,
more
how can
emphasis.
we say, what in your opinion is the most pressing transportation problem facing where? Now we have to take a free-form answer and turn that into a scale that we now have to compare another category scale
not
to?
doing
They're not the same.
Transportation's a little touchy,
I understand
because
what you're
we have actually have data on that topic, but let's pretend we didn't have that. So you bring up a good point, like, you can't numerically, that then would put criteria on us to have quantitative.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there quantitative. Are you, like they do in the transportation survey right now, are you able to get where you need to go? Do you have a reliable primary source of transportation, whatever those questions were? And then through the yes, no's, et cetera, that's where the response rate comes through, say, all right, we have let's say 60% of respondents saying that they don't have reliable transportation through these four different
Sure.
questions. Okay, now that
But,
surfaces.
but if then you say, okay, so they say that they don't have reliable transportation, and then we now have to say, oh, but they ranked fire rescue adequate, police excellent, library excellent, health and welfare poor. Is health and welfare, because they put poor, is that more important than their inability to get transportation, or is it less important? We can't know that unless we ask
Health and
them,
wellness a category.
under community facilities and services.
Okay, so under that category, right, because it's so broad. And so I understand what you're saying. I think that if we have a singular list that somebody prioritizes, that we gain kind of a more quickly, especially, an overall emphasis, right, prioritization. My only, and I can go this way, like, especially where you clarified that these are the categories versus the language that's in here now.
Right.
That's helpful. As a generic statement, I would say that, typically the more granular questions under a category, that's part of the validation as to really, it doesn't take at face value somebody's understanding of a broad topic, like health and wellness is a top priority. But when it comes to
Well,
like
it's,
the more,
but specifically facilities and services. So, if someone says poor because we don't have a hospital in town, but they also said they can't get around town, how are we to know which one is more important without asking them which category is more important, transportation or facilities and services?
there's more, there would have to be more work done.
And I think we can achieve that by moving 13 to the end with the list of categories. Okay, you've gone through, you've learned as much as you're going to learn, you've been informed, hopefully not led,
Well, the
prioritize
the
categories.
focus is on what we learned, which it should be, that's what what we led with our sort of grounding a couple meetings ago. If someone says, priority is transportation, what have we learned other than transportation's a priority? Right?
Well, if you look at that respondent and they said transportation's a priority, and you look and it says transportation needs met, well, then they're pretty happy.
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So that goes back to,
you just see that in action.
back to the influence that you're listening to. So you may be listening to your own needs, but then you've got grandma squawking in the back room, blah, 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 saying that, I can't get anywhere, you're never around to give me a ride. So now there's a problem in transportation, when it's not your problem, it's her problem. Okay, so those are the types of dynamics that we can't plan for. And they might show up, and may not show up. But I think if we finish with our, what are we calling this thing? Respondent profile, and then have a paragraph that says, this is an introduction to the survey. You will be dealing with the details of of these list of categories over the next several pages. Boom, then we go right into transportation. And then when we come just before goals, or that broader perspective, visions, goals, and objectives, if we're even using those things, because I don't think 26 is legit, because it all depends upon who's gonna give up the property.
Let's see.
You know what I mean? Well, it's
Say
page
that last
9.
part again, Bill, please.
Right.
What
yeah.
example? were you
Development, whether it's
Yeah.
business or residential, is all gonna be built upon who's giving up the property. What family in town has 5,000 acres or whatever, not that many, but 100 acres that all of a sudden they don't want it anymore?
Yeah.
Or that there's a change in philosophy of wealth, that they recognize that their wealth is no longer in owning property. Because there's no value to it, other than, if they're gonna farm it, that's one thing. If they're gonna forest it, that's another thing. But sometimes those types of things, as people age, they forget that that's why the property's there. It's not just to sit idle. Even our town forests aren't sitting idle. They're periodically gone through and forested for maintaining that forest. So, in my estimation, then, that question, if you had to choose one area to encourage business development, you can't say
Well,
that.
we know one former resident's thoughts on eminent domain.
Yeah, it doesn't,
So what do
doesn't
you
work.
think about,
Yeah,
the general issues and priorities for the town of Ware, though? Did we get anywhere on,
I would suggest that, along with Salem, but to understand that we're changing the whole picture to address the categories, period. And we can adjust those, because they're gonna rank the category as being doing well or not doing well, in both fashions,
In
at
that-
the
in that
end,
case,
at the end.
In that case, I would then say, the placement at the end would be.
Yeah.
Would be.
yeah, seconded.
So then we would have an introduction to say, this is our survey, these are the categories you will be considering. And as opposed to making that, how did we do it before?
I think that's reasonable.
The town of Ware is beginning a planning process, blah, blah, blah. That's still a good statement for the beginning. But right after the respondent profile, to make these are now the categories you're gonna be considering.
Yes.
Or not, you're going to be, we would like you to consider,
And
and go forward from there.
I think you've used the phrase like a mechanical question. One thing I'd like to try and avoid, I'm worried that with the general issues question at the end, or whatever we're gonna call it now, the topics, would people be biased towards the questions, the topics that are at the end? And so if possible, I think we should randomize the categories in the survey. So
So
they
not
wouldn't,
have 'em in the
not
same order.
everybody would hit transportation first.
Right.
With the hope that will avoid, a bell curve of, oh, well, the things I care about most are the things you just asked me about on the last page.
Yep.
Or we may see that and realize, maybe this, this data wasn't,
Gotcha.
at that single point.
So going back to then, if we're gonna identify this as categories, as opposed to priority, concern, or issues, then we're gonna rank the top 5 categories. No? I saw that, Ian.
No, I like saying just categories and omitting concerns, issues,
Yes.
actually, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's only that many, do we just straight up rank them, not top 5, bottom 5? Or, well, no, because we wanted to know what we're doing well and what we're not doing well in.
Right. I mean, there's 7 sections in the survey, 8 including general issues. But if we expand, community facilities is one, community services is a second. So expanding those big categories into smaller categories, because they're 2 different things. Community facilities is one thing, and that's buildings, and services is people. So there's 2 different things there. Land use, as far as growth, is one thing, and management is another one. How are we managing what the town owns, that type of thing. And that's addressed in that whole category as well, as far as land use and development, so. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. We good to go on
Agreed.
putting general issues on page 8? No longer on page 3? All right,
Right.
moving on. So we addressed transportation, last time you were here, we said nix the thing. Philip was the same thing. But it became a question for myself that it's obvious a concern because somebody took a survey, which I guess you have results of the community, which wasn't a large sample, but it was still a survey. But also
A
it's.
larger sample than the last master plan
Oh,
survey.
was it? Okay, so, but the issue was that we had kind of a mandate from the RSA that this should be a consideration. Although we weren't gonna ask the same questions as far as danger zones,
yeah.
because a lot of those issues, as far as the answers were concerned, we're dealing with
The state road.
state roads. State roads that we
So
have
the
no.
RSA mandates that transportation be included in this survey? Is that?
No, it does, it's a category. It doesn't,
It had some musts and some mays, and I don't have.
yeah, I gotta find that.
And so it would be a must that transportation
I don't know.
be a, but that's what we're talking about, right? That-
Yes, hang on. The must is vision and land use. And then the may, the first one is transportation.
So that's clear.
It's a may, so we could eliminate it, but I think we need to include it, but get different data, because the data from before doesn't help solve
Right,
any
like-
problems. It's, well, this area is a bad, well, they cut the trees down, well, it's no longer a problem.
Well, and in terms of, so, and this is, I don't know, it was discussed earlier, but, so it seems that it would jive that transportation be omitted because of the two reasons of, state roads, et cetera, so no ability. And the second would be sort of like the drainage piece. This is too acute a scenario to be relevant.
Right.
To the point you just said, which is,
Right.
you know,
But based upon our discussion at the last, which I did,
Yeah,
I
no, I
have,
get it.
I have a copy for you at home, actually, it's my copy, but.
Okay.
I'm using it.
it's okay.
But we came up with 2 additional questions, and then I left the last one that's in the current document. But are you able to commute as your life demands, yes or no? If no, what is needed to make your commute functional? What means of transportation, in the second question, what means of transportation provided by other towns should where considered to be helpful to your commuting abilities? And I'm hesitant to use the word commute as a way, I mean, getting around but when people think commute, I'm going
They
to
think
work.
work.
So maybe there's a different way to state that. And then the third question was, what in your opinion is the most pressing transportation problem facing where? Please describe.
If we need a transportation section, this is fine with me. I mean,
Well, the only thing, it's not, I understand it. The only would be the last one is, again, is the most pressing when you may not believe, I guess you would leave it blank. If you don't think there is a
Well,
transportation
I
problem.
mean, to your point,
facing where.
we are saying, please describe.
Sure.
So it's almost saying like, put something here. So maybe,
It
and
is
really,
saying.
I would,
Yeah.
I would ask, 15 and 16 to have a like, if any clause on them.
Right, I mean, these are, again, these
How
are all,
would
these
you
are
say?
all presuming that you,
So like that 16, what in your opinion is the most pressing? Yeah, I guess what?
I don't believe there is a
Right.
pressing transportation.
Yeah.
If any, at the end,
Yeah,
okay, comma, if any.
opinion.
that's to number 16?
Yeah.
And I would also do that for 15.
Correct,
At the end, community abilities, comma, if any.
right.
If I can interrupt wordsmithing 1 second.
Yes.
So I'm still confused on one item. So there's this 2024 where transportation survey results with answers to these essentially to these questions. So as we're saying that does not, that should ask this again in this context?
Well, the question is, where is that posted?
Say more, please.
Where is that posted?
So, that was
Is that available on the town website, those results?
the data. I think it is. I think. If not, it's,
20 years old, right?
no, that was
24.
finalized a couple months ago.
Sorry,
That
what
was
this
the
document?
transportation survey.
So this here is
from the last,
the 2024 Where Transportation Needs Survey results.
yeah.
It was, the Southern New Hampshire Regional Coordinating Council for Community Transportation participated.
So to answer your questions, from my perspective, I have two problems with the survey. One, low number of respondents, and that could be indicative of a whole number of things. They did a ton of outreach, so I don't know that it was outreach.
Okay.
I found some of the questions to be quite leading. For instance, when they said, do you know anyone who has an issue, getting where they need to go, however they worded it. Well, if we all know one person, that doesn't answer that one person in town needs help. It now looks like
Yeah.
50, 100 times that, because everybody knows the same one person.
We all know Mary up the street needs a ride.
Well,
And the 15 of us on our street all answer that we know.
Yes.
Yeah, so as a quick tangent,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to move back to what Bill had mentioned previously is, hey, people have the time to save and they can have a conversation. Perhaps this is leading us to be more explicit in our directions, to be, from what perspective are the questions being answered? Like, answer the questions as you experience, right? So,
Yeah, that would be at the
Say, for
beginning
instance,
of our opening paragraph.
Right.
Or secondary paragraph, to
to
say.
that point, so because some questions being answered in the first person, some being answered in, this is sort of just general knowledge. So the first issue, Sam, was some questions were leading,
First was low respondent.
low response rate. So the question I have there is, do we have or will it be part of our process to define a respondent rate threshold? Right, so if we're saying, hey, there's 346 respondents to the transportation survey. And we're saying in the context of whether or not that should omit transportation from the master plan survey, saying it's a low response rate, so it doesn't bear weight.
No, I don't think
Or
so.
as much weight.
I think
Right.
that document should be public information, because it's not on the website.
Okay, so.
And so if you could send that to us, that would be awesome,
Okay,
because then I think we should table this section until we get that report.
I think this is just, it's 3 questions. I think we can have these questions and just move on. It's like, it's harmless. This section is harmless, is what I think.
I think it's harmless. The only risk that I would see is it credits, maybe reading too much into it, but if I just answered this survey and the same question is being asked, I might think.
And then skip the question.
Right, if you answer,
Just from a credibility standpoint.
if you
But if
answer,
we have the data, why keep?
yeah, but
barking
not
up the tree?
everybody's thinking that thought either,
What's that?
what you just said.
No, I'm not, I'm just saying that's from my perspective.
Right, I'm
It's
just
rich.
saying that not every some people are survey hungry.
Sure.
They like
I'm
doing
simply
surveys all the
putting out there,
time.
If we already
You
have
know,
the
I
information.
see
sure,
my
can we move
bank
on?
or credit card wants to give a survey, not today.
I am trying, believe it or not, I am actually in this case trying to move on to another question.
Which is fine.
Right, it's just simply saying, if we have all right, so if 342 responses is not a sufficient threshold, what would be a sufficient threshold for data to be considered usable?
There isn't one,
Right.
Yeah.
other than the fact that we want to, as I began this process last month, we need a higher response, better response. We need at least 20%, in my mind, just to make it realistic. Otherwise, if we're making decisions,
couldn't agree more.
ultimately, on a very small, less than 10% the last time.
And to your point, Sean, which I do hear, if there are, because the counter would be, not the counter, but the extrapolated example would be, hey, if there's like a land use survey out there that's something that a bunch of us all just took, would that be sufficient to exclude it from this survey? And the answer is, I don't know, and I don't think that's out there. We do have one that's here about transportation,
Has to be coordinated.
and, yeah.
Right, so it may be that we look at that and say, oh, it's obvious that this is their concern, so can we affirm that concern by re-asking the question in a different way, fashion for this section?
I don't know that you formally motioned to table it, but I would agree. We should just,
Table.
let's all get the data and
Okay.
maybe be a little more informed on the transportation.
In the new information brought in, if I'm on board, it said, we want a higher response rate. Like, we're targeting a higher response rate, so we want to validate.
Yeah,
It's important to include this topic because, overall, our threshold response rate that we're really targeting is whatever that is.
Oh.
Decide. That makes sense.
yeah. So we brought up, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, that at the end of each section, we were gonna ask a question of, what did we miss? So does question 16, if we're gonna say we're gonna go with those three questions, does question 16 suffice for that statement?
I think we should have an identically worded question.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, so I don't think 16 does. I think we
Okay,
should have
so,
a,
what is the identically worded question?
what more on this, what more about this category would you like to make us aware of? And even.
So what additional information about this category would you like to share?
Sure.
Does that sound good?
And I would even per page,
Yeah.
Yes.
what
this
additional-
category, and then parentheses, repeat the category, even though they just answer some questions like transportation, whatever.
Okay,
I like that.
bottom of each page. Or the second page. Or the third page. All right, so the details of transportation are tabled to next time. And obviously, the numbers are in red if you have a printed copy, that's because those are fluid. Changes we talked about last time on page 4, are adding recreational areas maintenance, town property maintenance to those overall. So we're looking at community facilities and services.
Just from a mechanical piece, and I guess it's a comment and a question. Does it help or hurt the aims of the survey that the categories will have very different question and ranking structure, right? Under transportation, we have 3 essentially open-ended questions. Under community facilities, we have a ranking grade, a cascading ranking grade.
Right.
Under land use, we have a 3-option multiple choice. Under natural resources, we have a 5 scale. I would like to note that.
That has to
and-
be unified.
Yeah, having completely different ranking and
So-
scoring mechanisms seems difficult to, do you know what I mean?
So given the fact that those categories are established by Southern New Hampshire Planning, or whoever was the one who was part of the process to begin with to put out the survey, because this was not done by the planning board. This was done by hiring, and it was at the end of, after the group session. The group session happened first, and then the surveys were sent out, if I recall properly. Because not the whole population of the town didn't participate.
Sure, of course, yeah.
In that opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, so just
So
kind
I,
of.
personally, I don't see the problem. I don't see an issue.
You don't see an
I
issue?
don't see an
Okay.
issue.
Okay,
I do know, I would say, as far as issue-wise, having a little more meat to transportation would be helpful. Having a little more meat to these other categories, like Phil mentioned ADUs and possibly STRs.
so I guess my
under-
only,
Under housing and zoning to flesh that out more, because those are concerns that are not only here in our town that's being argued about, but also statewide being argued about.
No, I hear you, and that makes sense. I'm saying, would it not, if it can be done, which I think presumptively it probably could be, right? So we have, on 4, we have community facilities and services, school systems with a ranking, excellent through don't know. Could we amend land use on, page 5, that says, encourage new residential subdivisions to match the question asking of excellent through don't know, or it doesn't matter which one it has, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I
It could be excellent to don't know, or yes, maybe no.
Yeah.
But the point is, with the meat included, because I hear what you're saying, Bill, and it makes sense. But it seems sort of intentionally strange to have this 5-score ranking system
Yeah.
next
I
to
think
a 3-score ranking system when there doesn't seem to be.
Even more directly, this one.
Yeah, yes, correct, yeah, we even have a literal 5-score here.
Yeah.
But then a subcategory of very important and unimportant.
Yeah.
When we
With
have-
no don't know option.
With no, don't know, like, that is, I don't see, there doesn't seem to be a compelling reason why those are all asked in such different ways. And then my question would be, can we adopt a uniform ranking scale across those categories,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I think that's,
I don't know which one's
Critical.
best, looking at it in 1 second, but.
So there's a distinction though. In asking facilities and services, you're asking to rank where did I just see it? If those services are excellent, good, et cetera. Or going over to drinking water, we're not asking if our water's, yes, there's 5 categories, but we're not asking the same question.
Please, so say,
So we're looking at level of importance over here, and we're assessing not level of importance, we're assessing quality
to
of
me, that's
services.
more indicative of, we should be asking
Yeah,
level of
right.
importance here, and we
And-
should be asking quality of services here.
yes. I'm saying you can phrase the question,
Under natural
I
resources.
I think community facilities and services needs an additional set of questions, more meat, as you say, to say, okay, this is how we're doing, but how much do you care about it? Same thing here, how much do you care about it, but how are we doing?
sure, right, and adopt the same scale.
Yeah,
Because that's the point. If I'm like, okay, in this survey, E means excellent, right? But then I go to this next section and I'm like, okay, 5 is very important. Like, so which one am I? Am I an E or a 5, or where am I with these? And then if we want to extrapolate that data, we have to read and interpret, like, okay, we have a bunch of E's.
yeah, like,
You know,
if
is
we're
that
gonna-
good?
If
or
we're
do
gonna
we-
turn it into 1 to 5 in the background, just ask that in the beginning.
That's what I mean. Correct. So why don't we do that? And why do we have to say, like, okay, and these aren't even alphabet, these are just the first letter acronyms. These are, like a P, like, is a P a 2? What, like where, what
Yeah,
I'm
it's
saying?
like, oh, I'm gonna give everybody an A.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's actually just adequate.
Yes. So that's all. Just look, and again, maybe we can do that and come up with whichever scale we think is, I'm not advocating for one scale or the other. I'm just saying keep them consistent.
Right, so if we go 1 through 5 each time,
Yeah.
what are we asking?
And then I think it's easy to put in the description of, for instance, 17, please rank these 1 through 5, where 1 is excellent
Yeah.
and 5 is, or probably, whatever. Some people, whatever. As long as we're consistent,
It doesn't
I don't
matter.
care.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Yeah,
five is
being
excellent, 1
being-
is poor, and then you hit the exact same thing
Oh,
on,
2 is poor, 1 is I don't know,
1 is don't know.
or doesn't apply.
You could, what is it?
Or
Is
as
it actually
a
5?
sixth
Yeah.
category.
I was
but
gonna
yeah.
say, you could go 0 through 5, 0 being don't know, and you can still apply that to every category here, right?
Yeah.
You could, it's
So what do
another,
you-
it's another point, it's another thing to the point. If we have a don't know category in one of them, we should I would assume we would need a don't know category in all of them. basically.
Yeah, we
right?
talked about it
So-
earlier. We
Alright,
don't want,
record scale.
we don't want
Yeah.
answers from people that know they don't know.
We don't want answers from people that know.
All right,
they
so-
don't know. Okay, so should we we should eliminate don't know.
No,
No,
I
everybody-
think
Oh, I'm
they
sorry.
should have the
I'm
option to
sorry.
say, I
You
don't
should.
know, like, I don't
I-
want to give you bad data.
I understand, okay, yeah,
Usually that, I would see that typically represented as neutral,
yeah.
right? So you have strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly
Mm-hmm.
agree is the kind of typical 5-point scale, which this is more or less getting at.
Yeah. And again, as long as it's this, again, I don't care which it is, I don't, if we, yeah. I don't care if it's 5 with 3 being neutral in the middle or don't know, like whatever, but just have it be the same across each.
No, you need to say 1 is fail,
Sure. Fine.
2 is poor, 3 is adequate, 4 is good, 5 is excellent, and then a not applicable category.
That's another one where I'd be curious how the tool handles it, because surely they deal with this every single day.
Yeah.
SurveyMonkey, where, because we are gonna be getting data, we're gonna be seeing averages, weighted averages, and it's like, okay, what happens when you eliminate don't knows? And it matters if we track them as 3s, and it matters if we
Yeah.
track them as 1s or 0s, or
Yeah,
does it have the ability to separate them from the numbering scheme, which I think would be ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, I obviously don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that, but it would, yeah.
We have a whole stack of SurveyMonkey questions.
I know that we were trying to keep to,
Yep, we're done.
so before going over the last session's minutes, I'm just thinking a timeline, if there's a discussion to be had, just because I think this is great work, and we're getting really deep into it. But I don't see, if our trajectory is supposed to be 2 more meetings, this being 100%. If it's an arbitrary,
I'm not
timeline, I
losing-
think that we
I'm not losing sleep over it.
lose sleep over getting it done,
Yeah.
or?
We gotta work through it, and we work through it. I mean,
Meaning we should not hasten,
meaning that we should not try to rush through this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've read that.
Don't-
Yeah.
Don't rush through this.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm putting that out there for discussion, but that's the sense that I have is,
So the question would be, to throw out there, if we are having a similar meeting in context to this in the middle of October, that is okay, because we are working through it to the best of our ability.
I mean, we can still hasten it to set
Sure.
the goal and to say that our next session is gonna go 3 hours. Not make it every session,
Yeah,
but we might wanna commit to that. Or, I mean, 'cause we got 3 more meetings, technically,
in September.
in
yeah.
October.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think, last I heard, there was nobody up for a second meeting in September. I get, well, you'd still have October. We
Yeah.
need to re-up this if we're gonna re-up. We need to do that before the end of October. And really, it's get the planning board to vote again,
Yeah.
we just have to make
Which
sure
is,
it's done
it's
before.
augment, our deadline is
Yeah,
gonna
okay.
take
I
longer.
just wanna make sure that it actually takes place before the end of October, if that's what we need to do, and
Okay. All right, so to recap. For next time, Sean is gonna send us the data
yes, the transportation survey.
for us to review and to see if there's anything we want to expand in that category of transportation. Or come to the conclusion that we need to eliminate it. Because, and just make the argument to the planning board that there's already been a recent survey done about that, if that's the way we go. We've talked about sufficient threshold, so think about that for next time, of survey response for this in the end, which, again, we can dream for that, but never see it realized. But we can put expectation, especially if we take the time to do the educational piece, to let the community know why we're doing this, okay? So then, community facilities and services, I'm not sure if there's any, other than changing the ranking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anything else that we need to add to that.
Well, so not necessarily to the list, but, you know, we were contrasting, I think, 17 and 19,
Which was,
being, I think, on that section, which includes 17 right now, not only how are we doing, but how important is this to you? You know, we may have the best, and I don't want to, I don't want to pick a bad example and have somebody beat me up. I'm going to pick on animal control. We may have the best animal control in the world, but nobody cares.
Right. So we're adding two things to the bottom, is a ranking.
Or potentially like a drop down for each category, like rate the category and then tell us what you think about the category. Like there's no option, for example, for me to tell you what's wrong with animal control here, is what I'm saying. So you could,
Rate and reason why, right?
something like that.
Okay. I thought I put multimedia in there, but under community access television. I think it jumped onto the second page and I deleted it by accident, wasn't paying attention. Okay. So then that means when we come to land use, we need to expand that to 5 categories, 6 categories. And any other type of ranking system that doesn't fall after those two things. So if there's not a whole lot to deal with other than the ranking process, we could easily move through
Yeah.
the next 3 phases, except for wondering what land use and growth management questions needs to be expanded upon. So if we can do that as well, okay, homework. Okay? 1 is transportation. 2 is explore any expansion on the questions. 4, community facilities and services, land use and growth management, and natural resources and open space cultural resources. And we could even throw in economic development if we wanted to, but. Okay. Can we do that for next time? That way we'll hit the ground running and be able to make those adjustments quicker. Another thought that just went through my mind is that we just appointed another subcommittee for power, what's it called?
That's
yeah.
not technically a subcommittee, it's a new committee under RSA.
So on energy, so is that a category that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What's the committee?
Energy.
the energy.
Energy.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be its own category, but in like the visions and goals section that the other towns have, like you could just ask people to elaborate, like, do you share the vision of clean energy for the town of Ware? Like, agree, disagree, neutral, like something like that. And I think you could have that go on for like, not just like energy, but like all the stuff we wanna learn, like, I'm not like coming up with stuff on the spot right now, but like just blast out all the categories and goals and visions at the end of like stuff we wanna learn.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions on homework? Okay, hearing none. We have minutes from August 7th and August 21st. And these were, the August 7th were emailed to us, the 21st were not, they were posted. So if you haven't, and there's not a means for us to get this automatically. It's not already in there, or that I know of, unless she added it, I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
now that you say it, yeah.
So you may want to check under the planning board, there's a subcategory for our committee, and all the information is already there.
I had no issues with the 7th.
Okay,
I would move that we accept the minutes of August 7th.
Second.
discussion? All in favor?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
8:27,
21.
21 rather.
I had 2 edits. Line 38, there's a vice chairperson where throughout otherwise it's vice chairman. I just think for consistency, just, so line 38 as vice chairman. In line 67, services is spelled wrong. That was 38 and 67.
And there's an E missing on line 61 on therefore. Doesn't have an E on the end.
I ended up Googling that, and it was like, they're both accepted these days.
There's an English
Yeah.
version?
Yeah,
In
Yeah.
my life,
Yeah.
there's an E.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, you are?
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the 21st minutes as corrected.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I again apologize for not emailing that
That's
out
okay.
to you.
Yep.
Got home yesterday and my life changed. So my schedule got all messed up. But that's how life goes. So,
Motion to adjourn
okay,
the meeting?
Phil,
Second?
second, Sam, okay, all in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay, motion passes.